All present.
Councilmember Thompson, it looks like you're unmuted, but we didn't hear you. Will you just do a mic check? Nope. So I'm going to suggest you check your audio settings, particularly since you're going to need to be talking this morning. Okay. We will move into an update on our zoning code rewrite. Just as a review, this was a process that we began talking about undertaking a couple of years ago, and then in the last year, 2020, citizens came together. I think is it Wendy that's here with us today to discuss. Hi, Wendy, welcome to discuss an update. In the process so far, over 800 residents participated in a survey. Wendy's kind of from a strategic planning perspective, guiding the process moving forward and alongside Andrea. And I just really appreciate the level of engagement we've seen so far. And council members and the public, there's a report, like it's a 2 or 3 page report. If you haven't gotten it, we'll make sure that you get it as council members by email or by a link. And then the public also, once after this presentation, should be able to take a look at the summary that includes an update on the breakdown of who we've talked to, like renters, homeowners, et cetera, the steps moving forward, and of course, the feedback that we received from the public that's made it clear that having a simple, understandable, predictable zoning code that allows for housing where we need it and our community to grow is really important. And so with that, I'll pass it over to Wendy or Andrea. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you, Madam Mayor, Council President, Council members. So nice to see you all this morning. It's been a little while since I've seen your faces. So today, Andrea and I are going to give you an update, as Madam Mayor said, on the zoning rewrite project. The project itself is one that I'm sure you're familiar with. It's been ongoing for quite some time over the course of the past year, and I've recently joined the team from a project management perspective. So we are going to walk you through an overview of the project to reground everyone on what we're trying to do, review the scope and the phases of the project and how we're trying to get it accomplished, talk about when, show you the timeline, and then Andrea is going to give you some really specific project progress updates on our outreach to date, as well as what we've heard from our community. The point of the project, the overall object and scope goals of the project are to rewrite our zoning code. As you know, our code is approaching 55 years old, and zoning codes have about a 50-year horizon. So we are working on the code to modernize it, and probably most importantly for us as the city of Boise, to implement Blueprint Boise. So we are building on our mission and our goals across the city, our the strategic important areas that you as council members and our community have indicated are important, and trying to fully engage the community in this complex project. Our zoning code needs to be user-friendly so that developers, homeowners, renters, we all understand what the zoning code is, and making zoning fun and exciting, of course, is a great challenge. So we are trying to pull in as much of the community as we can so that we can really incentivize good design. The difference between having something designed well, where people enjoy living in the city, and have something designed poorly, has a direct effect on how we all feel about living here. So those are our scope overviews and what we're trying to get accomplished. We've broken the project down into multiple phases. Phase 1 was really organizing the work. We did engage an external consultant who's a specialist in writing zoning codes. The specialist's name is Clarion, the name of the company. You've probably heard of them. And then we went through a preliminary outreach assessment. This was our phase 2. And this is when, as the mayor mentioned, we reached out to the community and gathered as much feedback and input as we could. The diagnostic report was the major deliverable from that phase. And that's the specific update that Andrea is going to share with you shortly. Our goal is really to ensure that outreach occurs over the entire course of the project, but we had an entire phase dedicated to it up front. We are now moving into phase 3. This is where the rubber hits the road for the project. So the zoning code itself can be a little weighty. And so we've broken the code into 3 different modules. Module 1, which is what we're working on right now, is a 3 to 4 month period of time where the consulting team and our internal PDS team work together to draft the first installment of the zoning code. This is really focused on uses. Our module 2 will then focus on design, how things look, design elements. And then module 3 is really about the process. Each one of these modules is broken into about 3 to 4 month chunks. Our phase 4 is about putting it all together. So consolidating the zoning ordinance. And then phase 5 is ensuring that we have understanding and adoption. To give you an idea of how we plan to pull the public into this timeline to make sure that we're hearing appropriately, this timeline gives you an idea of the specific places that we're essentially going to pause and make sure that the public fully understands what we've accomplished to date and what's coming. So you'll notice that phase 3 in the middle of the diagram in green is where we are. And in phase 3, we have 3 different public input months set aside. That doesn't mean that's the only time we're listening, but those are the months that we specifically, the major deliverable and the major task for the project is to listen. So May, August, and November are the 3 months that we anticipate planning events, making sure that we're hearing from the public, and then into the phase 4 and 5, which is the blue, off to the right of your slide. This is when we start to compile the code and put it all together for public release. Of course, the public will be able to comment then too. We have 2 months set aside, but at that point we're in 2022. So our strategy is to pull the public in and get input early, but do it in a way that is digestible pieces of information. The zoning code itself, if someone starts from scratch to read the zoning code, it might be overwhelming. So we're trying to release it in pieces as we go. There are some really specific major milestones that we are targeting. So our diagnostic report has just been completed, and that's what Andrea will go over with you shortly. Our phase 3 completion, it will be completed with our integrated staff draft. So we expect to see that by December of this year. There's a lot of work between now and then, but that's our planning milestone for the completion of the integrated staff draft. Our first public draft will go out in February of 2022. And then we should have our final revised code complete with all input by November of 2022. You notice there's a big chunk of time in there. That's a period of time that we're unsure how quickly we'll receive feedback and whether we might need to change course over the course of that time. So we have deliberately ensured that we have enough time to adjust as needed. Our project end is December of 2022, so a little bit more than a little bit less than 2 years from now. The project is doing very well. We are currently in execution for our phase 3, and everything is proceeding in a way that we feel like we have good engagement from the community. We published an initial survey, got quite a bit of response, which Andrea will go over with you, and then we're currently reaching out with a second engagement right now. I'll pass the mic over to Andrea and we can entertain questions at the end.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, I do have
Just a second, Andrea. Yes, go ahead, Council President.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions here if I could, and that way maybe Andrea, as she is talking, can also answer some of them. So in the project overview, you talk about streamlining the process and making it more predictable, which is certainly one of my big goals. But what I didn't really hear in there is ensuring that what is able to be developed aligns with what's in Blueprint Boise and what's in our predicted land use changes in the future. So maybe you could walk me through how that's going to happen.
Excellent. Thank you for the question, Council President Clegg. So the Blueprint Boise is the foundational document that both our consulting team and our internal PDS team is using as guidelines. So Blueprint Boise is what's informing the code rewrite. the concept of the neighborhood activity centers and the concept of the regional activity centers and concentrating density in alignment with those activity centers is very much guiding our plan. However, with the current zoning code right now, the perception that we've heard loud and clear from the community is that depending upon who is doing the building, the rules are different. So that is the perception that that we are working to try to respond to. Did that answer your question?
A little. I just hope that we really focus on aligning with Blueprint Boise more than streamlining. Aligning to me would make my job a lot easier. Right now, the plan doesn't always align with what can be approved. And that makes it really tough. And I think that's part of where that perception about subjectivity comes in, if that makes sense.
It does. Thank you for the comment, Council President. We'll make sure that we're clearer in the way we speak about this. That is most definitely the goal of the project.
Thank you. Second question, if I could, you talked about that we'll next look at uses and then look at design. We'll look for public input. So two things. I first of all was hoping that we'd focus a little more on a form-based code. And if we're going to do that, we probably need to educate both the public and the development community about what that is. And if we're going to do that, I'm not sure that, you know, and certainly I can be corrected on this. I'm not sure that identifying the uses first is the most important thing. It might be identifying the form that works, and then identifying what uses work in what places. So I wonder if you could also comment on that.
I can certainly try, Council President, and then I will ask Andrea to pitch in. So the consultant Clarion speaks quite often about form-based codes. So he is indeed steering us in the direction of form-based zoning, and the sequence that their firm is recommending that we follow, that we've been following to date, helps walk the community, specifically the citywide advisory committee, this group of 12 citizens that are helping advise us as we go. It walks us through and educates as we go. So to date, we've spoken not only about the zones and about how many there are and whether or not we have the appropriate number, should we collapse, should we expand, but as well as the uses within the context of compatible form. So the Clarion team is guiding us in the direction of form-based. And that's probably, if I go much further than that, I'm certainly out of my expertise. Andrea, is there something that you could add to that that might answer Council President's question?
Yes, thank you, Wendy and Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg. Yes, so we are looking at uses first to kind of create a foundation for us to build on. So what is allowed, what is not allowed, and what is conditionally allowed. And so we've had some misalignment with what we have in our current existing code and what our Blueprint Boise or our comprehensive plan speaks to. And so we want to create that foundation first, and then we'll move on to the design standards that will support that foundation. And then beyond that, we'll look at the processes and procedures. The important part is that we're looking at each one of these modules individually, and then we'll take a look at it holistically as well to make sure that each one of those modules supports and is in alignment with one another, and most importantly, our comprehensive plan and our mission and initiatives that we have before us.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If I could follow up. So Andrea, it still sounds to me like we're really focused on separating uses in different parts of the city, rather than looking at the kinds of form that can house different kinds of uses and allowing that to happen. Is that, am I hearing you wrong, or is that so?
Madam Mayor, Council President Clegg, Actually, our conversations with our community as well as our citywide advisory committee have almost been an integrated approach. So people have said, okay, our comprehensive plan has identified these mixed use activity centers and places where multiple uses, jobs, places for people to visit and recreate can occur. But our current zoning code doesn't allow for that. And so that's kind of what we're looking at. So, we haven't finalized anything. The direction that we're currently leading is that, hey, we don't have some of those mixed use zones that we're looking for. And we are looking at some visual examples that exist throughout the city of Boise, as well as nationwide, to give us an idea of the actual form that we want. We have talked about form-based code. We've talked about a traditional text-based or Euclidean code as well, which we currently have. And I think that the citywide advisory committee, as well as our community, has said, I think we need a really good balance of both of these types of codes. So they want the text, but they also want the visual illustration and those graphics that come with form-based to create that urban form that we're all looking to achieve. So I think we're going to get a really good balance as we move forward. We're just starting that drafting process of Module 1 now. And so I think when we visit with you next time, we're going to have a good foundation for you to take a look at and see how we're moving along and how we're progressing.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor,
Sure, go ahead.
I just want to reinforce the council president's input. It seems to me if the sort of structure of our approach is to define uses, then go look at form and layer that on top, then what the result will be a use-based code. And so the council president said it better and asked better questions than I can, but I share her concern. If we are looking first at uses and then looking to design guidelines that we think are compatible with those uses, we will be creating a use-based code, not a form-based code. And that's okay, maybe, but if the goal is really to balance and really to lean hard into form-based, it seems to me that this set of next steps just sets it up to make that very difficult.
Madam Mayor, Councilman Bajent, we have talked to our consultant about that. They're very aware. They have done over 200 codes nationwide, and they have a firm belief that this really is the best way to go. They feel that political buy-in and public buy-in has to occur through the use process. And so identifying where density should be located and really focusing on housing, uses, and as well as transportation and how those integrate together early on so that we can actually establish a map that will guide us further. But as I said, our discussions haven't been isolated by any regard, because everything is so integrated with one another. Building form is so important to how we feel as individuals and pedestrians and how people move throughout the city. So we want it to be safe, efficient, and most importantly, an effective use of our land.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Sure, go ahead, and then I'd like Andrea to move through what she intended to present too from a time perspective.
Thank you. Andrea, Wendy, thank you so much for your presentation today. As you may be aware, we at the City of Boise have embarked on work to create a strategic plan for diversity, inclusion, and equity that will affect every bit of work that we do at the City of Boise. And certainly the work that you're doing here affects our entire city and affects everybody at every economic level, every walk of life. And I'm just wondering, will you be bringing that lens to this work? I know for myself, I had no idea that there were such things as zones until I became a homeowner in the early 2000s, and a fraternity house wanted to move into my neighborhood. And in fact, that was the very first time that I came before this council as a constituent, giving my input on that. So I'm just wondering, are we taking steps to ensure that folks who may have been, like myself, naive about this structure that we use to decide how we shape our city, how we are being inclusive, and making sure that they too are providing input?
Madam Mayor, Council Member Sanchez, I would like to take a try at that answer. So yes is the short answer. The DEI efforts that are underway throughout the city are something very well known. To me, certainly, as we move through this project, we will be bringing that lens. Specifically, and Andrea will touch on it in her update, we are engaging right now with a public survey. We put mailers in the mail starting yesterday, reaching out specifically to the areas of our city that traditionally don't always engage with us, in the very attempt to try to hear some of the voices that we don't always hear. If that method of outreach using a mailer sent to people's homes is not successful, then we will try something else. It's very important that we hear all the voices across the city, or else our zoning code project will be significantly less successful.
Thank you, Wendy. One bit of advice I would suggest for you is to connect with the folks who worked on our local complete count for the census in 2020. We developed some very strong partnerships in that effort to have a complete count. And I believe those partnerships were invaluable. These folks already have those strong relationships with diverse members of our community. And it would save us a lot of reinventing the wheel if we just go back to those initial relationships that we took. We took great pride in doing a great job in doing our local complete count in 2020. And so I suggest we keep going with those relationships that we started.
Thank you, Councilmember Sanchez. We'll make sure we do that.
Andrea, go ahead and jump in.
All right, thank you so much. So as Wendy had noted, we have had significant progress in regard to our public engagement activities. They originally started in November of 19, and that was under our previous mayor Meter. We did some early outreach at that time, and we held some interviews as well as some focus groups that gathered a great deal of information. Those focus groups included our elected officials from our city council, as well as our appointed officials from planning and zoning, design review, as well as historic preservation. And then we also met with each one of our neighborhood associations were invited. We had our frequent users. So we had architects, engineers, land surveyors, planners. And then we also had our active community members that we hear from on a regular basis. We asked them to come join us as well. So we ultimately touched approximately 80 people through that event. And then we had a mayoral change. And Mayor McLean said, hey, let's take a step back. Let's reevaluate our scope, make sure we're talking to the right people, and making sure that we're being inclusive to the city as a whole, geographically. And so we did that. And from that information, we were able to add on some additional engagement activities, which included 2 kickoff events that we held in November of 2020. Then we actually went out with an online survey as well. Our online survey was very helpful and informative to us. And with all of that information, we were able to compile a final diagnostics and solutions report, which ultimately told us, here's what we're doing well, here's what we could do better, And here's how we can better align with some of the best practices that are being nationwide. And so when we go into each one of those items, that early outreach that we had in November of 2019, with those approximately 80 individuals that we met with individually, ultimately they said, we need to align with Blueprint Boise, that there is not the tools that we need in the zoning code today to adequately implement Blueprint Boise. They wanted better zoning districts that would allow for us to implement those activity centers that are discussed in the comprehensive plan. They wanted better use regulations, meaning they wanted more uses that were allowed, and then a clearer division of what was allowed and what was prohibited. They also felt that we could do better, that we could have really high quality design. And so they wanted us to increase and enhance those standards citywide, improving our review process to make sure that everybody is able to participate and everybody knows how they can adequately participate in the process to be heard. And then everybody said, hey, we need it to be a little more user friendly. We'd like to see graphics and illustrations and charts that really help inform us what the city is looking for. And so that information was compiled into ultimately the draft diagnostics report. In addition to that initial outreach, we also heard from Clarion as they reviewed our current code. And they said also that our current code and Blueprint Boise, they just aren't aligned with one another, and they aren't supporting one another the way they should. They also identified that we had some outdated subdivision standards that also should be reviewed through the updated process. All of that information was compiled into the draft document. And then when Mayor McLean directed us to go out and do some additional public outreach, we held those initial kickoff events in November 2020. We focused on really 3 questions. We asked people, how could the zoning code better achieve the vision that we have within our comprehensive plan? What types of land uses could we create to accommodate new people and jobs that were entering in our community? And then ultimately, how could we ensure that the zoning code allows everyone to benefit from what's offered through the city of Boise? And over again, we heard that they really want to focus on environmental stewardship. People wanted access to transit. They wanted the option for multiple housing choices. So whether they were looking for a condominium, a single family dwelling, or even an ADU, they wanted those options. They also felt that keeping Boise unique and really preserving our foothills and our Boise River were key components that were important to them, and really making the city fair and equitable for everyone. So those were some of those key topics that we heard at our open house survey. We've then moved on to our online survey. That actually ran from November to December of 2020. We collected over 800 responses, which is actually a really good response rate. The interesting part with this was 85% of our respondents were residential property owners. So they actually lived and owned homes within the city of Boise. So as we reviewed all of the information that we gathered through that online survey, we heard that we had a very long survey. And then we also had a very technical survey that was more geared toward frequent users, where 85% of our respondents were actually not frequent code users, and they were not familiar with the code and felt that the survey was very difficult. And so what we learned was that ultimately we need to have a simplified approach to gathering information and making sure that it is understandable by everyone, whether you're a frequent code user or a property owner, or just somebody interested in how the city is growing and evolving over time. Ultimately, our survey results were really good because we had 70% of our respondents say that they agree or strongly agree with our comprehensive plan. They were supportive of our goals and our mission, which was great news. We also heard that the ordinance was very confusing. It was long. They felt that it was inconsistently applied, and there was this perceived notion that the code favored development interests. So we needed to take that into heart. They also noted that there were ways that zoning requirements could be varied or waived through variances and waivers. And they felt that that made our process unpredictable. And so they asked the city to create a predictable set of standards that would be applied over time equitably and not varied or waived throughout the process. We also heard that neighbors, neighborhood plans, and neighborhood associations were unsure of how they fit into that development process and how they could influence what they wanted to see in their neighborhoods. So we need to clarify that role as we move forward and how they can engage into the process. We also heard that development decisions appeared disconnected from traffic, parking, and open space impacts. And so they wanted us to be able to somehow evaluate that as we moved forward. So we were able to package all of that information up into a single report, which is the Diagnostics and Solutions report that Mayor McLean was referring to. We will make sure that each one of you receive a copy of that final document. Ultimately, it talks about what we heard from our Boise citizens through all that engagement, what we see based on national experience, and that is Clarion's perspective of how we're doing. And then the last component really talks about the detailed recommendations and specific changes that we heard from our elected officials, our appointed officials, and our staff. So as we're reviewing applications, those misalignments that are happening, things that need to be clarified, or they just aren't easily understood. So those items that we need to work on. So that was a big deliverable for us, and that actually ended phase 2. As we move into phase 3, we're going to be working on that draft module 1, which is permitted and allowed uses. And you're going to see a draft document come to us. April 22nd is going to be its big debut, but we've got a lot of work before that draft document is done. And as Wendy had mentioned, we have compiled a very simple survey. It's 3 very easy questions that we are publishing online. So it went online yesterday. It's for everyone to participate. However, in talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, just as Councilmember Sanchez had recommended, we have to get our community involved. We have to be able to touch all of those citizens that are underserved, those people that we don't hear from regularly. And so we have sent reminder postcards to a number of our targeted census tracts. And if you recall, back in 2019, Vitruvian did a health score for our different areas throughout the city. And we had multiple tiered health evaluations for those areas. And so tier 1 areas were those areas that we identified as that they had a lower health score than throughout the remainder of the city. And so we wanted to target those individuals. And so we have sent just over 14,000 postcards out. Individuals have the option to fill out the survey on that postcard, place a stamp on it, and return it to us, or they can go online and fill out the survey there. So they have 2 options. So that is, we're hopeful that that's going to touch a lot of those households and those families and individuals that we may not hear from regularly. We've also placed postcards in a number of our libraries. So we've got our satellite libraries. We have provided some there as well. And then we're strategically handing some out. So you'll see us at Janus, Jesse Tree. We also have some accessibility partners that we're working with to see if we can't touch some of those other communities as well. So we want to keep in mind that this is only one way that we're touching our community. We still have our project website that anybody can visit. We have an email and a newsletter that we are sending out to anybody that signs up to be on our email list. We have our continued citywide advisory committee meetings that are held on the third Thursday of each month, with the exception of April. We've actually moved that to the fourth Thursday. We're also doing road shows and meeting with a number of individuals. So thus far, we've met with the American Institute of Architects, the Builders Contractors Association. We've met with our accessibility committee. We're meeting with Public Works, and we've also met with the Sierra Club, and we'll continue to do those road shows as well. And then we've heard from citizens or groups that say, hey, we want to come in and visit with you. And we've had open office hours. And so we've made time for those individuals as well. So we're still continuing that continued outreach to make sure that we're touching on those people. But really the public review cycles that we'll be reviewing over these next several months are going to be key. And we're really going to have to step it up and make sure that we are touching those populations. So as we had noted before, we'll be releasing a document at the end of April, and we're going to go out to the public and say through May and June, we're going to say, hey, what do you think about these permitted uses and allowed uses that we've identified? Then as we move to module 2, we will say, hey, what do you think about these design standards? Are they achieving what we're looking for as a community? And then we'll go back out again in November through December and touch bases with everybody to make sure our processes and procedures are working. But as promised, we'll be visiting with you multiple times to keep you up to date and make sure that you know what our community is saying and ensure that you are participating to the level that you'd like to. So that really is where we are with our process and how we've come thus far. We know we've got a long road ahead, but we have a lot to celebrate. So with that, I can answer any questions that you might have.
Madam Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Andrea. That was a great presentation. I appreciate it. I think it was very compelling what you shared about the levels of health that was discovered. I think that's really great information to have, and perhaps an opportunity to partner with health providers to help be partners in making sure that we hear from those communities. I wonder if we could spend some time educating our partners, if they don't already recognize how zoning can affect the people that they're serving. Because I think getting the buy-in from these agencies and organizations that already serve these populations that we want to hear from, I think they'll be key, but we need to make sure that they understand the connection between this rewrite that we're doing in zoning and how it directly affects the quality of life of the people that they serve. So I think once we can do that, Andrea, I think we'll be able to connect more with that population. I've done outreach myself, and I found that when I tried to do it directly with communities that I did not have a strong relationship with, it took much longer. And yes, I could mark it off my list of things to do that, well, I did it, but was it effective? Did I get the results I wanted? I found that when I connected with those groups that already had an established relationship with those communities, once I established that relationship, I was able to piggyback. They loaned me their credibility. And then I was able to get the results that I was looking for. So I think it's really important that we really connect with those partners, those potential partners, and make sure that they understand the relevance of this zoning rewrite and how it's going to positively affect their constituents that they serve.
Madam Mayor, Councilman Sanchez, thank you so much. I think you are absolutely right. And so we are going to spend this next period of time really focused on building those relationships so that we know how best to do that next step of public outreach that we're going to see in May. So we've got some time to really build on those.
Madam Mayor.
Sure, we're 15 minutes over on this, so it looks like both Council President and Council Member Woodings have something to say, and then I'm going to ask that everybody get additional comments through Amanda to share, so that, because I want to make sure that Council Member Thompson has time to present his ordinance. Go ahead, Council Member Woodings.
Thank you. Just on a process, from a process standpoint, I think it would have been helpful, at least for me, to receive the report in advance of this presentation so that I can kind of wrap my head a little bit more around it and have better questions to ask. And also from a process standpoint, Andrea and Wendy, are you guys working with the Office of Community Engagement on this as well as you're figuring out the outreach? I know that they've already kind of internalized and put into their processes a lot of what we've been talking about here.
Madam Mayor, Council Member Woodings, yes, that we're working with them very closely. They have had a team member on the project team, and now they have multiple helping us out. So we are trying to leverage them to the best of our ability.
Great, thank you.
Madam Mayor, I was just going to suggest that we do get emailed the link to the report, and then we schedule another time where we could actually have a discussion rather than just an update. It looks to me like there's a lot of discussion.
Sure.
Thanks.
Thank you both for joining us today, and we will follow up with additional dates for discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Thompson, I'm going to just hand this next topic over to you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. And I'm sharing my screen. Hopefully you can see that now. And anyways, I'll propose that you let me get through my presentation and then save questions for the end. And then maybe we can also go over 11:30 just slightly, but I'll move quickly as I can to be thorough.
TJ, it's my intention to try to give you that extra time. I just want to also make sure that staff and folks in this room have a chance to get out for a couple minutes to eat before noon.
Absolutely. Well, I feel like today I'm presenting my life's work. It's been a long ride, and I'll tell you what, I want to start off by thanking three people that have done an immense amount of work. That's Jen Patino in legal, who's put countless hours, and then two on the outside, Jeff Rosenthal, Idaho Humane Society, and Lisa Kaufman with Humane Society of America. What I'm proposing is not just an animal code, but a compassionate animal code. It's really common sense changes. It's a complete rewrite. It's essentially a repeal and replace of our current code. As we all know, Boise is really at the center of the universe when it comes to dogs. I mean, the Idaho Humane Society literally brings more in just to meet demand, and that's very uncommon around the United States. As you know, worked over 2 years on this, extremely passionate about animals, and I know you all are too. I know you all have dogs, cats, or have been prior dog, cat owners. So it's nothing new to all of you. Okay. Now, if I figure out how to switch the slide, there we go. Okay, so how did we get here? You know, as you know, by now, the state of Idaho is way behind when it comes to animal protection. We're 45th in the country, not a great place to be, and there's nothing on the horizon that the state legislature is going to be doing anytime soon for our companion animals. Reached out early and noted and found out with the state AG that we have clear authority to regulate, in particular around companion animals and exotic animals. This will not impact hunting in any way. It won't impact those that are private breeders of animals. It doesn't impact production, agricultural animals. Those are primarily hands off to us. But if we're going to make a difference, if we're going to have a change, this has to happen at the local level. I've been working over the last 2 years, as I told you, with lots of different folks in this community. I've worked with Idaho Humane Society, experts. I've attended the animal law conference, made major connections there. Animal enthusiasts, owners, kennel clubs, handlers of special animals like the raptors. And, you know, to date, it's been really overwhelming in terms of support. I've received hundreds of emails in support of these modifications. This is my second time before council. The first time, of course, 2019, and COVID certainly slowed things down as well. I've been before leadership, council leadership and the mayor twice to discuss this, and had extensive involvement from the legal team, Jen Patino in particular. Big thanks again to her. This code is really split into two sections: general enforcement and animal cruelty. General enforcement, as you know, right now is handled by the Idaho Humane Society. We hire them to do that work. They weren't able to really use our code. It was so antiquated and out of date. So this really does a lot of cleanup that we need. New definitions. It amends the role of our animal enforcement, clarifies it. Dog licensing gets cleaned up. We add the option for a 2 or a 3 year license. It adds the rabies vaccination, or also, this should be noted, proof of an antibody titer test is also okay, which is important to many of our animal owners out there. It updates the non-commercial kennel license, which is near and dear to my heart. I once had to go door to door for that because I had 2 indoor cats and 3 dogs, so it crossed the 4-dog limit. It keeps the limit at 4 unless you have all cats. Then it goes up, you can have 5. It does put the limit total max at 10. The big kicker on the non-commercial kennel license here is going door to door is very intrusive. There's some individuals that now are next to apartment complexes requiring over 40 signatures to get every single year. This just adds an option where we can do a mailing. The city clerk will do a mailing rather as an option to going door to door from time to time. So move on to this next slide. It also does improvements, you know, around what was called vicious dog. It will be dangerous or potentially dangerous dog. This was a pretty heavy lift, to be honest, to ensure that we get it right and make sure we have a process that's fair for both the animals and the individuals and or other animals that are involved in something that occurs. Barking dog is much better defined in how to enforce a barking dog, clearly defined and how that process can move forward. It also ensures protections for ADA service dogs, which wasn't in there at the time. Now, pardon the pun, but let's move to the 800-pound gorilla in the room, and that is animal cruelty. Now, this will add specifically a section, a definition of what animal hoarding is, and it's not based on a number of animals. Again, the number of animals is covered under the non-commercial kennel license, but it does provide a definition, and it adds that is a form of animal cruelty. In terms of cruelty itself, it's much more clearly defined so that it actually can be enforced. Things that are common sense, such as food in sufficient quantity, water, veterinary care that is reasonable, living environment that's free of excessive waste and contaminants, prevents severe matting and severely overgrown nails and or hooves, prevents beating or intentionally injuring your pet, prevents dumping or abandoning your pet. It prevents intentionally poisoning a pet owned by another person. Adds hoarding and it adds extreme heat, cold that results in things such as hypothermia or frostbite as diagnosed by a veterinarian. And it also we are limited in what we can do in terms of fine, but it makes the minimum fine $250 for animal cruelty, which of course is much too small, but it's one of the best things we can do in terms of enforcement. Also, it finally ends the practice of elephants, large cats, and bears in the circus or other similar shows. This is not uncommon. Entire countries have done this. We would be third in the state to do this. Ketchum and Blaine County have already done it. This is clearly a form of animal abuse. It's proven. Bears on roller skates and elephants on a dress in their head is not something we need to see. And how they are trained to perform those acts and travel around the country is a form of animal cruelty. This also will add a feral cat section. So I want to explain this because there's a lot of misunderstanding around it. Cats come in, let me back up. It is in the code. It was before. It's more clear now that you are supposed to keep your cat, just like your dog, indoors. We all know many people let their cats roam free during the day. There's one in my neighborhood. He lives a great life and he's always walking around. We do know that does limit their lifespan, but it's what the owner has chosen to do. But what happens is when a cat is picked up by the Humane Society, they're quite frequently collected back by the owner if it's a house cat, if it's a cat that they've been letting out and they know it's gone and they go check for it. It's the feral cats, they don't get taken back. And cats get very sick very quickly when they get very nervous in the shelter. And within days, they're sick and very well might have to be put down. And what this does is allow a couple days for someone to come first get their animal when he's missing. If they don't, spayed or neutered by Idaho Humane Society on their bill, and they take it back and release it into the location. It's the humane thing to do with these animals. They will die quickly if this process isn't adhered to. The Humane Society no longer does kill cats. They will not go back in that practice. If we don't imply or put this into place, what we could end up saying is a shelter that just simply no longer handles cats. That's not where we want to go. And it should be noted that only about 5% of the actual feral cat population ends up coming into the shelter and would go back out. It's a very small percentage that they actually bring in. This also will close the puppy mill loophole. And what I mean by that is ending the sale of dogs and cats in retail pet stores. Quite frequently, these are linked to puppy mills in terms of how they are obtained. This is commercially bred cats. This is not Zamzo's PetSmart. They do an outstanding job. Those are animal shelter pups. Also, there's a clear breeder exemption, so they will not be impacted. I support breeders. One of my animals is from a fully full-bred Finnish Lapin as well, and I show my support for them. There's currently no retail pet stores in Boise. Has been in the past. Both had very dire histories and recorded past with those animals, but presently there are none. So this is a really good time to do it. It also will include in the parvo puppies coming out of cardboard boxes to some degree. What I mean by that is it's really a partnership. What this will be with private entities. You may have remembered the story of the puppies that were sold out of the Cabela's parking lot that had parvo. Cabela's then took a step to say that's no longer allowed in our private parking lot. What this will do will say that the sale of these animals from our parks, the streets, the alleyways, sidewalks, public right-of-ways is also no longer allowed. So it partners with the company that says, you know what, you can't do it here. And now the city says, and you can't just push it out onto the sidewalk. So it closes that loophole and gets us moving forward. And then lastly, I'm sorry, I just covered that slide, but I hadn't turned the slide yet. So again, that's to the animal stores, and that's to the animals in public right-of-ways, the cardboard box puppies. Lastly, this is where we can do some real good as well. Animals unattended in hot cars. First of all, it prohibits it. It says that if it's too hot, then certainly it's a form of animal cruelty too. But what we do here is we will really set the gold standard. We go above and beyond. This has been done, the Good Samaritan clause that allows an individual to check look around. They see this dog is clearly going to die or in harm's way. They check the doors, they look for the owners around the vehicle, they're not there. This allows them to enter that vehicle and save the animal. It's under strict criteria. Again, checking the door, look for the person, but they have to call 911 first. They get the police on the phone, they find out how soon the police will be able to get there, and they say, okay, then go ahead, you enter that vehicle, we're on our way. They stay with the animal until the police are there, and they completely relinquish the rights of the animal to the police at that time. So this will really set the gold standard. It's been done statewide, the Good Samaritan, in around 30 states. We would be the first city, I believe, in America to take it on ourselves, but it's not going to happen in Idaho, folks. So it's on us to do these types of actions, take these things and save our furry friends. And that's where I'll leave it. I moved quickly, but I think I covered ground where I wanted to be. So free to take questions or comments. I also know that Patrick Bajent had some recommendations, and Elaine had a comment in terms of the signage for a potentially dangerous dog. You can add those now if you'd like, get them on the record.
Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
Councilman Thompson, thanks for this. I'm going to tick through these fast so that they're in the record so that my colleagues have a chance to talk and provide their input too. But first, I want to point out that I did consult with the most important constituency I have, which is my veterinarian fiance, and she had nothing but praise for many, many of the things that you put in here. She was particularly impressed that you included excessive matting in the definition of animal cruelty. So good job. Section 5.111 deals with dangerous dogs, and it creates exceptions for dogs that attack fowl. There's a conflict in the words with domestic and wild fowl. I think that's just an easy cleanup. It's 511C8, so whoever's taking notes on this can catch that. The bigger concern I had was in 5.120 that dealt with impoundment. So section 5.120C1 says that we can notify an owner of impoundment by mail, but then depending on the type of animal, E2 and 20F make it so that the animal can be disposed of or adopted out in 3 days. So it's possible that you're notified by mail, you get your mail 3 or 4 days later and your animal's already gone. So there's a timeline issue to address in there. And then the third thing is pertains to the animal license. We require cats and dogs in particular, to be licensed. I think that's great, but I'd like to loosen up how we require licenses to be displayed. So for example, my dogs, I don't use the city tags. I have an engraved brass plate that's riveted to their collar so it can never be lost. I think as I read this, that's actually an improper display of a license, even though it's a much better way to do it. So I think we can tune up how we require licenses to be displayed. Those were my 3 small pieces of input. My big piece of input is great job.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor.
Or go ahead.
Just for everyone else, real quickly, I asked that Councilmember Thompson change the provision that dangerous or potentially dangerous dogs that the public be notified by a sign saying beware of dogs to one saying dangerous or potentially dangerous dogs per Boise City Code XYZ. Because I think there's a lot of beware of dogs signs around and it would be confusing.
Thank you for that. Madam Mayor, if I could just add the next steps as well. I forgot that was my last slide there. So the complaint ordinance will be available online. It is currently, but we're going to have a site set up which will allow residents to submit their thoughts in advance of the public hearing. And we'll be engaging, and we have already started social media outreach via the various city media channels. And we're proposing the public hearing be on April 6th to move forward.
Great, thanks, Councilmember. I think I saw Councilmember Woodings wanting to.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I want to thank Councilmember Bajent for making that clarification about the collars. My dog also does not wear her tag on her collar, but she has a engraved plate because when she shakes her head, it wakes up the kids. And otherwise, and she's a runner, so we have to make sure that she always is wearing identification at all times. I want to thank Councilmember Thompson as well for really taking some of my early comments into consideration in this subsequent draft. I had some concerns earlier about the language around the agency that is enforcing these laws and providing our animal control and care. And he really took those into account and came back with a much better draft that not only reflects our current agreement with our animal control and care agency, which is the Idaho Humane Society, but leaves our options open for the future in case that agreement should need to change in any way. So I really appreciate that. Thanks, Councilmember Thompson.
Thank you, Councilmember Woodings, and all of you. I also, Madam Mayor, I should mention that any of these tweaks that have been mentioned will certainly get into the final thing, but they'll be made after the public hearing. So everyone will be commenting on the current draft in terms of the citizens will be commenting on that. And then post-public hearing, these edits and any other potential edits would be made before a first reading.
Madam Mayor?
Yes, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman Thompson. This is great work. I have to admit, I am concerned about the cat at large portion. And, you know, I'm a renter, so I have to comply with what the property owner asks, and I'm not allowed to have my cat inside. You know, and I actually got my cat from the Humane Society for $10, best $10 I ever spent. So, you know, I'll just share something personal. The fact is my cat is an emotional support animal. I have a letter from a doctor, but I've never really pushed it with my landlady. If that part stays, I would have to do that. And I have to admit, as a renter, it gives me pause. You know, renters are in tenuous situations, especially these days. And a lot of us very rarely want to push our luck, even if we have the law behind us. So I just want to bring that to your attention. People tend to think of dogs as support animals or emotional support animals and service animals, but there are other animals that serve that role. And in my case, Murray the cat is my emotional support animal. So that's just one area I think we need to spend some time educating folks if that's going to stay in this ordinance.
Madam Mayor, if I could respond real quickly.
Then Halliburton, go ahead after TJ responds.
Thank you. Yes, that actually, we haven't actually changed the code in terms of that requirement. It's more clarified, but that was the law before. But the primary reason for that, Councilmember Sanchez, is for liability reasons. Say that a cat jumps into someone's backyard and their dog kills it. It protects the person that owns the dog because it was on private property. So it's not that Humane Society is certainly not out trying to find cats and bring them in. That's not their role. If someone calls and reports a cat, that's when they come. But they're not out trying to capture them. And I know so many people that let their cats run around. It's really more of a liability protection for if that situation happens. That helps.
Okay. Thanks for clarifying that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. TJ, Councilmember Thompson, I just want to say good job putting this together. I know how much work you put into it and how important this is to you. I'm really excited to see what the public engagement is going to look like at the public hearing and all these other areas, because people do care about their animals so much. And even small things like the things that Councilmember Bajent and Councilmember Woodings brought up about the tags, those types of things. I expect those will be some of like the minor changes that we see. And I'm excited to see what some other, smaller things come up. But again, thanks for all the work that you put into this and the team that worked with you as well.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, just thank TJ for bringing this forward and look forward to the public hearing as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you all. We will recess for 25 minutes and meet back here at noon.